3, 2, 3, 2, 1, go. Hello guys, how are we all doing? Welcome back to yet another video, folks. Today we are predicting the Premier League Week 31 for the English Premier League football, and all to play for the top four title race, Europeans, places and relegations, and it's all to play for. But as we saw in the midweek, we saw Liverpool, go 12 points clear of Arsenal. We saw Aston Villa put in a brilliant display against Brighton. Man City were at their best, but they just beat Leicester 2-0. And last night, Chelsea beat Tottenham Hotspur. Let's just get this show on a row. Before you get into the YouTube channel, hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel. We are just about to, I've got 21 subscribers so far. Let's just smash 24 subscribers and 10 likes. It's just free to do. Right, first up, Everton versus Arsenal. With the title race almost over, Everton could pretty much wrap it up for their arch rivals Liverpool this weekend as they welcome Arsenal to Goodison Park on Saturday. In midweek, Everton were unfortunate to suffer a 1-0 loss to the Champions exec Liverpool in the Merseyside derby, in a game which Bento had a goal ruled out in the first half before Diogo Jota separated two sides with a strike midway through the second half. But the Toffees have been unbeaten in their previous 9 matches in the Premier League. Has been much improved form throughout the last few months ever since the return of David Moyes in January, replacing Sean Dyche. As for Arsenal, gunning for the title, Arsenal coming into this one off the back of a 2-1 defeat of Fulham in London derby at the Emirates Stadium on the other day. They opened up with the scoring via Mikel Merino before returning to Bukayo Saka, doubled their lead. Then Rodrigo Mures pulled a goal back late on. The Gunners are preparing for the quarter-finals of the Champions League in midweek with a tie against Real Madrid. They do, though, beginning this weekend's round of fixtures, sitting 12 points behind the aforementioned league leaders Liverpool. That's my team. Everton have been locked themselves down, and Sean Dyche tried to do the same. The Toffees lacked so much in the attack, and that they were still too easy to beat, even when they played well. They face an Arsenal side that has criticisms levelled at them for lacking fluency, attacking spark throughout the campaign. But the return of aforementioned Saka should prove to be a major difference maker, and the visitors are favourites, but it is to be expected to be a low scoring affair at Goodison Park. But I'm going to go for Everton 1, Arsenal 2. Next up we are going to let's see, come on. Right. Next up, a big game at the bottom. Ipswich Town versus Wolves. Right, there we go. Right, here we go. Ipswich Town has been competitive this season, but this is simply a must-win. Last chance saloon, whatever cliche you prefer, as they take on Wolverhampton Wanderers. Ipswich Town has perhaps given themselves a chance of safety with 8 games of the 2024-25 Premier League season to go, pulling off their 4th victory of the campaign in surprise fashion at the Vitality Stadium in midweek against admittedly the out-of-form FC Bournemouth side down on the south coast. Kieran McKenna's side managed to defeat the Cherries by 2-1, one courtesy of goals either half from forwards Nathan Broadhead and Liam Delap. as for Wolverhampton Wanderers has been much improved since the appointment of the former Porto boss Victor Piore, replacing Gary O'Neill in mid-December. They will believe safety is secure if they can earn a victory at Portman Road this weekend. They return from the March international break with a hard-fought and slender victory over West Ham United at Molineux in midweek, courtesy of a 21st minute strike from Norway international striker Jordan Strand Larsen, who now has 3 goals to his last 2 games. Ipswich Town can close the gap to 6 points on Wolverhampton Wanderers. If they can get the win this weekend, they finished the year very well. They have since endured a really tough run of form. That win against Bournemouth in their first calendar of the year in the league would be will do confidence going into the big game against Wolverhampton Wanderers. Wolves, on the other hand, have been underwhelming themselves this season, but they have been much improved. They have been blustered by the inform of Jordan Strand Larsen. In both teams scoring may well be a good bet as Wolves sneak to punish an Ipswich side that will put everything on the line. This is a big game, this. If Ipswich beats Wolves, they'll close the gap to 6 points. If Wolverhampton Wanderers beat Ipswich, then it looks like relegation for Ipswich. But we shall see tomorrow. But I'm going for an Ipswich win 2-1. I think they will do it anyway. And then right. Next up, Crystal Palace versus Brighton. This is a big game of both sets of supporters as they face their arch rivalries in the FA Cup semi-finalists. Crystal Palace takes on the Champions League chasing Brighton at Selhurst Park. Last weekend, Crystal Palace pulled off an impressive 3-0 defeat of the capital city rivals Fulham at Craven Cottage in the quarter-finals of the FA Cup. Ujay Eze and Amal Sarr scored the first goals before the game was settled in the 75th minute via Eddie Nketiah. The Eagles have since shared a 1-1 draw with the bottom of the table Southampton at St Mary's in the league during the weekend, with Paul Onkaracha opening the scorers for the Saints before Mantamas França equalises in the second half of stoppage time for Oliver Glasner's side. Fabian Hurtzler's Brighton and Hove Albion have rediscovered some impressive form after a 7-0 defeat to Nottingham Forest at the City Ground in early February and remain in contention for the Champions League, but their return from the March international break has been poor. Last weekend, the Seagulls suffered a defeat to aforementioned Forest on penalties in the quarter-finals of the FA Cup at the Amex Stadium. Before then, they suffered a 3-0 loss at home to the fellow top 4 or 5 chasers Aston Villa at home in midweek. So, Crystal Palace have been one of the best teams in the league since they won their first game of the campaign in mid to late October, but the Eagles have been very impressive, rediscovering their form from the back end of last season. But they do face a Brighton side that be a little concerned, but they could fall back into the slide they endured through the middle of the season. But given the visitors' recent form, as well as Palace being at home, signing with the Eagles looks the way to go for this one. But in Selhurst Park, both ended like 1-1 draws over the years, but I think maybe snap that trend and maybe Palace will win it 2-1. Okay. Next up, we go to the London Stadium. West Ham United are trying to dwell under Graham Potter between now and the end of the season, whilst AFC Bournemouth try and rediscover some form ahead of a trip to London Following the appointment of the former Brighton Hove Albion and Chelsea boss Graham Potter, who replaced Juven Lopetegui in January, but West Ham United have generally been floundering as they struggle to become effective under Potter's stewardship. The Hammers returned from the March international break in midweek with a lacklustre performance at Molineux against Wolverhampton Wanderers, eventually suffering a 1-0 loss due to the 21st minute strike from Joran Stranded Larsen. And AFC Bournemouth have been generally very impressive throughout the region of the former Rayo Vallecano boss Andano Oliveira, but the Cherries have hit a wall since mid-February, and that continued in midweek with a very disappointing performance. From a challenging for a Champions League, they now sit firmly in the middle of the table, but having also been knocked out of the FA Cup last weekend, they were beaten 2-1 by a poor relegation-bound Ipswich Town side at the Vitality Stadium midweek. West Ham United have been frustrating to watch for their supporters throughout their campaign, completely losing their effectiveness, but that they had under David Moyes in recent seasons, but they face a Bournemouth side that themselves have to capitalise a little bit of late. But despite some good performances, Bournemouth will fancy themselves to score against West Ham, but West Ham will also fancy themselves, especially at the London Stadium, to punish the form of the Cherries. So, not a lot between them, but I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. This game has draw written all over it. I think that game will have draw written all over it, that's for sure. And that's why I'm sticking with my 1-1 draw. And next up, a big game in the race for the European football. These two sides have both enjoyed magnificent campaigns as Aston Villa now prepared to welcome Nottingham Forest to England's second city for what is an intriguing encounter. In midweek, Aston Villa hammered fellow top 4, top 5 chasers Brighton Hove Albion by 3-0 at the Amex Stadium. Both Marcus Rashford and Marco Senseo scored to continue their own individual good form before a late strike from Donwell Mallam. The Villains are preparing for their Champions League quarter-final against a strong PSG side in midweek, having reached the semi-finals of the FA Cup last weekend with a 3-0 win at Deepdale against the Championship side Preston North End. Much like Aston Villa, Nottingham Forest also continued their impressive campaign by reaching the semi-finals of the FA Cup with a victory last weekend, defeating Brighton Hove Albion at the Amex Stadium via the penalty shootout. Since then, Nuno Espirito Santos then defeated Manchester United by 1-0 at the City ground in midweek, courtesy of an excellent individual goal from the former Manchester United winger Anthony Elanga. Aston Villa winter transfer window was extremely impressive one that has allowed them to rediscover some energy and form, has propelled them forward in 3 different competitions. They are brilliant at exploiting the weakness of the opposition, which is exactly the way which Nottingham Forest has been able to look like securing an unlikely Champions League spot. As a result, both managers could cancel each other out, and it may not be as thrilling as he could be for a neutral. I'm going for a 1-1 draw. Right, let's move on to Tottenham Hotspur next. So Ange Postecoglou continues to be under pressure, but the Australian giving it back to the supporters as Tottenham Hotspur take on the relegation-bound Southampton this weekend. Ange Postecoglou appeared to cut his ears and gold Tottenham Hotspur supporters after Pep Matar thought he had an equaliser against Chelsea in midweek, and that was eventually ruled out for a foul, and Spurs suffered a 1-0 loss of their capital city rivals at Stamford Bridge. But Spurs have been really poor throughout the Premier League campaign, with being their 16th loss of the campaign in the league in their 30 games, but they do have a Europa League quarter-final against Frankfurt still to look forward to. Southampton could be mathematically relegated as soon as this weekend if they lose and Wolverhampton Wanderers win at Ipswich Town on Saturday, but the Saints remain the points behind Derby County's record lowest points tally of 11 in the Premier League. But the Southerners very nearly enjoyed a victory midweek as they took a 20-minute lead against Crystal Palace via Paul Hutche at St Mary's, but he had to settle for a 1-1 draw due to their second half stoppage equaliser scored by maintainers França. Tottenham Hotspur have been struggling for a lot longer than this season, but the poor form Postecoglou can basically beam Trent back to 18 of his 22 or so months in charge of the club. They face a Southampton side. They have shown some signs of improvement, but under Ivan Juric, they are a lot more difficult to play against, but the bar was extremely low. But the Saints will fancy their chances to score at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, but even Spurs should come out on top. But to be honest, I think Spurs will have too much for Spurs. So I think Spurs will have too much for Southampton. I'm going for a 3-1 win for Spurs. Right. We have a West London derby taking place at the G-Tech Community Stadium this weekend as mid-table Brentford takes on rivals Chelsea, who are continuing to underwhelm in recent times. Frank Lampard's Brentford begin this weekend's round of fixtures sitting firmly middle of the table with 12 victories, 5 draws and 13 defeats. That very even record has been entertaining though, with their 30 games producing 98 goals. The Bees coming into this one off the back of an unfortunate 2-1 defeat to Newcastle United at St James's Park in midweek in the game which Alexander Isak opening the scoring, but Brian Mambeyo equalised from the penalty spot. Then Sandro Toile cross snatched all 3 points. As for Chelsea, Enzo Maresca's Chelsea have been underwhelming in the league since mid-December. When it appeared like they may be able to be involved in the title race, the Blues have managed just to pick up 3 victories in their last 4 matches in the league. But the visitors most recently edged past the capital city rivals Tottenham Hotspur by a 0-0 at Stamford Bridge in midweek, with Enzo Fernandez opening the score in the first half, but they're now preparing for the Europa Conference League quarter-final in midweek. Brentford will fancy their chances of finishing the season with a flourish, but as they sit firmly in the middle of the table, but having very little pressure on, but they face a Chelsea side that have been underwhelming for a while, with that victory against Tottenham joining the list of Copenhagen, Wolverhampton Wanderers, West Ham United, Leicester City, Morecambe and Southampton as teams have beaten since December. Could well be a good bet to the side with the Bees for this one. I'm going for a 2-1 win for Brentford. I think Brentford will do the upset. Will upset the apple cart. Right. Fulham versus mighty Liverpool. Fulham have been frustrating at times this season, but they remain in contention for European qualification. And as they now welcome a Liverpool side, they are inching towards the title. Marco Silva's Fulham were left frustrated at Craven Cottage last weekend as they suffered a 3-0 humiliation at the hands of Crystal Palace in the quarter-finals of the FA Cup due to goals from Abuja Eze, Amonse Sarr and Eddie Nketiah. They have since suffered another defeat in another London derby against Arsenal at the Emirates Stadium midweek, losing by 2-1. They do remain firmly in contention for a top 7 or top 8 finish, potentially European qualification though. As for Liverpool, Arne Slot's Liverpool endured a difficult few weeks before during the March international break. The Champions League elimination at the hands of PSG was followed by a defeat to Newcastle United in the final of the EFL Cup. That was then followed by a further suggestions that Trent Alexander-Arnold was departing for Real Madrid for a free transfer in the summer, but they did manage to edge towards their 20th English title in midweek. But as they defeated Everton by a goal to nil in the Merseyside derby, Fulham have put in some really impressive performances this season, but the motivation to play against the Champions Elite would mean they will likely to raise their game and then play on the front foot from the start. That said, though, Liverpool have been able to grind out victories performances throughout the campaign, so they may well concede, but they would have remained favourites down in West London. And I'm going to go for Fulham 1, Liverpool 2. Come on, Liverpool, we can do it. Anyway, we've still got four more wins until we are Premier League champions. Right, let's get into the big game at Old Trafford. We have a Manchester derby taking place at Old Trafford this weekend as Ruben Amorim's flailing Manchester United now take on potentially improving Manchester City side. Manchester United coming this one on the back of a 1-0 defeat to Nottingham Forest at the City Ground during the weekend, with an excellent individual goal from the former Manchester United winger Anthony Elanga separating the two sides. But the Red Devils begin this weekend's round of fixtures sitting firmly in the bottom half of the Premier League table as they now prepare to take on, I'd like to say, take on Lyon in the quarter-finals of the Europa League in midweek. But for Man City last weekend, upon their return from the March international break, Manchester City moved themselves into a 7th successive FA Cup semi-final, courtesy of a come-from-behind 2-1 defeat of FC Bournemouth at the Vitality Stadium down on the south coast. But the citizens are sitting just about trucked inside the top 5, which is expected to be enough for Champions League qualification. Most recently, he's passed relegation-bound Leicester City by 2 goals to nil at the Etihad Stadium the other day on Wednesday. Manchester United have struggled throughout the campaign for goals, and departures of Antony and Marcus Rashford in the winter transfer window, with no replacements coming in, has only accelerated that issue. They now face a Manchester City side that they remain some significance away off their previous level, but they do surely still remain favourites for the game that lacks quality in the reverse fixture when Manchester United produce dramatic late turnaround at the Etihad Stadium. But I'm going something different this time. I'm going Man United 1, Man City 2. And to wrap up the Premier League fixture, Leicester City versus Newcastle. Leicester City aren't too far away from being their immediate relegation back down to the Championship mathematically confirmed as they now take on a strong Newcastle United side. The appointment of the former Manchester United striker Rudin Vasanosari has not gone well at the King Power Stadium. Leicester City begin this weekend's round of fixtures sitting 12 points adrift of safety with 8 games of the campaign to go. The home team were solid enough in midweek, but they still eventually suffered a comfortable 2-0 defeat to Manchester City at the Etihad Stadium thanks to first half goals from Jack Grealish and Omar Mamouche. Newcastle United ended their long trophy drought just before the March international break by defeating Liverpool by 2 goals to 1 at the Wembley Stadium to win the EFL Cup. But they are now looking to ensure a Champions League qualification and Premier League. They continue their challenge for a top 5 finish in the league with a hard-fought 2-1 defeat at Brentford at St James's Park. Up on Teesside on the other day, courtesy of goals from Alexander Isak and Sandro Tonali, either side of Brian Mamboe, equaliser from the penalty spot. So Leicester City have endured an awful campaign on the pitch, but after a difficult summer off with the transfer targets or objectives not being met, a season of struggle was always to be expected, as now they appears to invincible that they'll be in the second tier, but now they face a Newcastle United side that they are expected to use their EFL Cup final triumph as the momentum to carry themselves through to the end of the season with a comfortable Magpies victory is to be expected. I'm going for Newcastle to win 3-1, and I think Isak will score for that one anyway. Oh, Isak is injured anyway. What the hell? Oh, sorry, mate. I think Joelinton will score, mate. Joelinton will score anyway. Oh, Isak. I think Isak might score, but yeah, I'm going for 3-1 Newcastle. That's my predictions then for the Premier League week 30 for the Premier League. Sorry, Premier League week 31. Sorry, I would say Premier League week 31 for the Premier League. Leave on your comments below, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.